Misconceptions of Entropy. Written by Athaz the Traveler. It is well known that for some time, there was an entity that was called Entropy, who conducted chaos across Radner, and was contested by nearly all nations that existed. However, the world being as large and diverse as it is, it was never possible for anyone to become truly educated about entropy. Many different and fundamentally incorrect interpretations of the entity and its actions have formed in the minds of countless people and nations. For this reason, I, as the most learned on the matter, have decided to create this text, to clarify all misconceptions regarding that entity which was called entropy, as it is a great pain to see it, or any complex subject for that matter, spoken of in a way that is wrong or untrue. The first point which needs addressing is a mistake often made by foolish theocrats and false enlightened ones who are willing to stretch the truth in their mind to support an underdog, so far that even pure evil is seen as either acceptable or rational. It is the simple thought that anyone, especially those sorts of people, has the credentials to discuss the entity or its actions in the first place. This is of course also common for those overconfident ones who were born or came to know of entropy after her death. It is truly a wonder, the confidence with which people who have not ever seen or met entropy speak of it. It is a greater wonder that those sorts deny the accounts of those who have interacted with and studied it extensively. The vast majority of individuals who attempt to educate others on entropy, have never on any occasion interacted with entropy. Their confidence in their authority on the subject is entirely derived from a desire to be and appear correct, rather than any experience or study. This is most useful for spiritual leaders, who seek to maintain their reality by fitting entropy into their narrative of the world, but also appears in many others who are simply overconfident and stupid. I know more than anyone else in the world about entropy. This is as indisputable a fact as grass being green. I have been discussing and studying entropy before even the war of Assyrian aggression, between the First Coalition and the Trillium Alliance. I have been on this case for longer than nations and religions who claim to know the truth about entropy have even existed. I have been pursuing and finding the answers before the Kingdom of Aurora, or even the Sterling Crownlands was formed, the latter having since been dissolved prior to this being written. I had been investigating for longer than the entire lifespan of one of the largest nations to ever exist. There is documentation of me interacting with several officials on the matter of entropy, these documents being again, older than many countries and individuals who claim to be wiser have even existed, and older than the birth of some countries which have since completed their life and died. These include records a conversation with the great Lugal of Theanikos, who, when hearing my question regarding the national policy on entropy worship, laughed at how it was so rarely discussed or practiced that he only knew of one individual in Radner who even acknowledged entropy's existence. He then assured me that the person would never be a capable threat to anyone, and told me that the worship of it was nonetheless outlawed in his country. In addition to the fact that documented proof that my investigations into entropy predate several religious declarations of the true nature of the creature, my recorded interactions with it also predate most others with the glaring exception of Carpicius. As described in my published journal, Apparitions and Entropy, the creature did appear to me in the form of numerous apparitions, providing physical objects which were observed by myself, and several individuals who had visited my city after the athazolant raid, as well as Carpicius. This means that there are mortal and immortal witnesses who can back up the physical proof of entropy's visits and interactions with me, all occurring significantly earlier than other reports of her actions in Radner. With entropy's awakening, our interactions continued. She had set fire to my city, and rained crying obsidian upon it. She tried to play games with me in the ruins of Crest Town, just after the death of Rum the Spirit Knight, which I engaged with in order to distract her so that the old Arashi and Viodixan forces who were there to transport war material for the fight against entropy could do so without interruptions from it. Thus the first misconception of entropy is denying my accounts or descriptions of entropy, or claiming to be better educated on the matter of entropy, when this is something that I have committed my life to for longer than the majority of countries which stand today have even existed. There are more or less 10 nations which have existed for longer than I have committed myself to the task at the time of writing this. My studies of entropy are the result of a deep, emotional commitment spanning years upon years, and I will not have my accounts denied or discredited by any fool who thought they could define the creature as late as its awakening based on 2 or 3 odd experiences. To put this into simple terms that are easy to understand, if one's first experience with entropy was after the destruction of the moon, and if they took no time to learn the extensive details and history of entropy going back to before that incident, then they know nothing about entropy. I am happy to teach anyone the truths of entropy that I have learned from my studies and experiences, but I will not take corrections on a topic as serious as this from those who know nothing. The second misconception of entropy that I would like to address is the idea that she is a manifestation, harbinger, or representation of her namesake. For some reason, it is very difficult for people to believe that anything in the world can be more or less than its label, as though anyone who places a label upon something knows it thoroughly and completely, and cannot be wrong in their judgment, and cannot be corrected down the line. This is of course an illogical viewpoint, since there is nothing stopping anyone from labeling anything however they like. There is no natural system in place to ensure that one who names something is accurate in doing so. The neobiotics in diarrhgate is the prime example of this, the state hilariously being neither new, nor bioticsine, nor a diarrhgate. That is how it happened that entropy became no as such. It was the label applied by Carpesius, the only individual known to have interacted with entropy as far back as the collapse of Jagdas, and who introduced it to the attention of Radner. Carpesius understood neither the concept of entropy, nor the demon which she was interacting with. Her application of the name entropy was an almost completely arbitrary and wholly uneducated decision. Entropy is not only not the personification of entropy, she is also neither the natural bringer of entropy, nor of death, nor of decay. Entropy's existence is not essential for the maintenance of the world. Things have died and decayed without entropy being involved, and they have continued to do so after the complete and total annihilation. Entropy, at best, was merely an entity which enjoyed creating scenarios which may have led to death or decay, but were conducted purely for amusement, scenarios which were likely to increase or accelerate entropy as a side effect, but nothing more. Thus, the claim that the death of entropy has led to the imbalance of the world is at best, not only fundamentally and completely wrong, but is also based on nothing more than a simple misconception originating from one's refusal to understand that a thing may be more or less than its name, or from their inability to investigate it further than learning what it is commonly called definitively the most surface-level details of a thing one can acquire, and at worst, envious propaganda against the name and cause of the new guard, its rulers and myself. The most frustrating misconception to confront or deal with is the idea that entropy somehow remains in any form. Prophets, rulers, and even random fools with dubious and outrageous supernatural claims have tried to undermine my work in defeating entropy. They are often misguided in thinking that entropy is a force of nature that cannot be killed, which is of course, a misconception of its own. To set the record straight, there is no entropy anywhere. There are no pieces of entropy. There is no corpse. There is no spirit. There is no soul. There is no afterlife. Entropy is not in Radner. Entropy is not in Eldam. Entropy is not in the end. Entropy is not anywhere, because entropy no longer exists. Entropy, the demon whose name was a misnomer, has been completely destroyed, and no part of it exists in any dimension, in any form, nor can any part ever exist ever again. I fully expect fanatics and obscure self-proclaimed supernaturalists to either continue to believe the falsehood of her supposed existence, or to claim it in order to give themselves some sort of spiritual authority over others, or justification for their actions. But the fact remains that this claim of her remaining, in any form, is a lie. The final misconception I would like to address is the judgment of morality of entropy. Although more rare than those who simply misunderstand entropy, apologists who have decided to join the unpopular viewpoint, and then decided that they were enlightened for having it, 5 or so seconds after learning what entropy was, do exist. While it is true that entropy was not necessarily always acting maliciously, she never had any good intentions. Crucially, she had an immense sense of self-importance, and lacked anything resembling empathy, being incapable of entering the state under any conditions. Entropy compulsively desired amusement. She would play along with anyone who brought her this, But, lacking empathy, she would never assist them if they really needed anything. Those who played games with Entropy would often be tricked into believing that she was like a person, that when they interacted, they grew closer, that when she smiled or laughed, it was a sign that their relationship had grown, and that she cared more about them. This is not a difficult trap to fall into if one's first meeting with Entropy were and she was in a good mood and entertained, because this is how humans typically function. But Entropy was not a human, and Entropy did not work that way. Those who were fooled into believing otherwise would go on to be proven woefully wrong once the games were over and they ended up being hurt. Entropy would open and close her interactions with others on her terms alone. If one were to have played a game with Entropy, and if during that, they had broken their leg, leaving them unable to continue, or had decided to stop engaging to go to sleep, then Entropy would look at them expectantly, annoyed, and somewhat disgusted by the audacity of their decision to stop, even if necessary for them to do so. Were they to attempt to explain why they could not go on, the demon would disregard them and demand their continued engagement or lash out violently against them in rage. Ceasing to amuse Entropy for a moment would anger her. Entropy was a careless narcissist who was fully convinced that every mortal only existed to provide her amusement. For Entropy, one failing to amuse her was equivalent to the human experience of using a broken reel on a fishing rod. You attempt to reel in the line, but the bobber stays in place. The reel is supposed to pull in the line. That's the one thing it's designed to do. But it's not doing that. One might react to this in a variety of ways, being annoyed, or disappointed that the mechanism no longer worked, with no clear explanation why that they could tell. The temperamental ones are prone to hitting, snapping, or throwing the rod in anger when entering this situation, and Entropy had the temperament of a spoiled child. Were you to interact with Entropy, you would have been seen as a mechanism that was designed to amuse her. That's what she would have expected from you, what she believed you were supposed to do. You are the fishing rod. The source of her amusement was also highly questionable, as she was entertained by things which were chaotic and explosive. She enjoyed seeing people in pain, as well as being the cause of the same thing. Watching people at their lowest, weakest state, caused her to smile, as it reminded her of her false superiority over them, maintaining the illusion in her mind that they were weak, and that she was strong, further reinforcing and rationalizing her self-serving agenda. I recall many times that Entropy had interacted with me. We had talked, beginning as generic discussion, until she found something to ask me about, something that I would get stuck on, that I would have to think about. I had asked her myself why she had done so, in cases that she did, and she told me that she enjoyed watching me struggle to find an answer. She enjoyed staring at me standing silently, knowing that I did not have an answer, knowing that I was thinking many thoughts, searching for it, searching for something I wanted. It was amusing to her that I did not have something, and continued to pursue it. Unfortunately for her, I always found an answer, each time, and she never did witness me fail. The Carpicious raids are a more well-known case of Entropy's sickening amusement. Raids conducted by the weak and immortal Carpicious upon various places. Each resulted in theft, and immense violence, which always returned to Carpicious, who assaulted her target in perpetuity to amuse Entropy, despite her increasing wounds. That is what Entropy thought was fun, watching one use their life for that gruesome purpose, with no regards for their own well-being. And in her name, Entropy's primary objective in existing, was to use people for her entertainment, by having them engage in destructive or harmful activities, with the additional goal of reinforcing her egomaniacal and narcissistic views of the world, which put herself before others, through the same means. There is no more Entropy now. I have ripped her into pieces. I have crushed those into dust. I have evaporated and removed from existence entirely every speck of a remnant of her mangled corpse. Entropy is gone, nowhere, eliminated from existence completely. Nobody will ever truly get to know Entropy as I had. Nobody will ever receive a visit from her, made only to watch them writhe in agony. Nobody will ever be asked by her to do things that they never would, to hurt people close to them. Nobody will ever trick her into thinking that they are her close friend, listening to her every concern in order to understand her completely, only to use that information to eliminate her entire existence in the most painful way possible down the line. Nobody will ever interact with, or know Entropy, like I have, And that is why people will continue to be wrong about Entropy, because they weren't there to experience her, to chat with her, to understand her, and they will continue to be steadfast in how they view Entropy from that immeasurable distance, further away from her than Raidner from Ildum, because they are too proud and foolish to educate it themselves. But I was there. I made sure I was closer to Entropy than anyone else, the only person close enough to be able to grind her into dust, into nothingness. And the remaining existence of some fools not being able to understand how, or why, is a small price to pay for the guarantee that she will never hurt anyone ever again, never hurt my friends again, never hurt Capitius again.